Hi, Kristijan. Very nice to see you. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Zlatko. Thank you for inviting me.
To start, can you tell us just a few words about CROSOL, the organization you represent today?
Yes, CROSOL, or Croatian Platform for International Citizens Solidarity, is a non-governmental organization. It's a platform of around 30 member organizations who work in the area of international development cooperation. CROSOL was founded in 2014, and as Croatia has joined the club of developed countries relatively recently, about 10 to 15 years ago. We didn't, as a country, have a defined international development cooperation policies, and CROSOL was founded, amongst other things, to help facilitate these discussions and help advocate for better policies in this area on the national and the EU levels.
So this year, Croatia is marking the 10 years anniversary as an EU member state.
Yes.
What has EU membership meant to Croatia? In particular, I'm thinking about the spheres of rule of law, the civil society, and the freedom of media.
Yes, well, it's been complicated. It wasn't as straightforward as many people maybe expected. I think the greatest progress in the area of the rule of law, democratization, strengthening civil society, and freedom of media, freedom of speech. The greatest progress was made in the process of negotiations for the accession to the EU, because then we had, as a country, we had a clear feedback from the EU. Okay, this is good. Keep doing this, but this is not good enough. You have to fix this, this, and this. And it worked very well because it incentivized the Croatian state and institutions to implement the reforms, coherently and in a real substantial manner. But after joining the EU in 2013, I would say Croatia has stagnated in many ways regarding the rule of law, and in some ways it has maybe even slid back. Because we are now a part of the club, we don't really have the carrot, so to speak, anymore. If you do this, then you will be able to join. So we have the reward type system. Now we don't have that anymore because we're already in. We already have access to pretty much all the mechanisms, funds, institutions, and so on. So it's much more difficult to discipline the. I don't mean discipline like in a way of punishment, but to enforce these common acquis and common norms and the rule. To keep working on it even after you have joined. There is not very much incentive to do it because there's not much the EU can do towards member states who are not respecting the rule of law. Until recently, well, we now have this rule of law mechanism which can be used to block funding and so on, but it's very complicated. In practice, it still leaves a lot to be desired because you need a lot of support from other states and so on, as we are seeing with Hungary and Poland. Even if it exists, it's not that easy to implement. And Croatia, I think, since 2013, it has done okay in some aspects, but I think our justice system, our courts are still very slow and deficient. Rule of law is being implemented, more at the pro forma level, because again, there is no real oversight over the institutions and the quality of their work. I would say the freedom of media in Croatia has somewhat deteriorated, maybe in the period from 2016, because there was a populist right-wing nationalist government at that time that had a really strong campaign against the non-profit media. And after that, during the government of Andrej Plenković, the government has expanded its political influence amongst several mainstream media, including the national broadcasting service, Croatian radio television, but also a couple of private media like Jutarnji list, Večernji list, and so on. Many of these large publications have some sort of, relationships with the government. They either receive substantial amounts of funding, or they're self-censoring in a way, maybe, and so on. From the perspective of civil society, which I think also is a part of the wider rule of law security, civil society in Croatia, again, it's relatively vibrant and active, because in the period during the 90s and the 2000s and so on, we have developed a lot of quality organizations. But again, these organizations are being sidelined in a way by the formal institutions. The access and the space for the civil society organizations is being limited, and sometimes also institutions are they're holding this pretense of communication and dialogue with civil society, when in reality it's just like a facade, so they can say we have these mechanisms, although these mechanisms don't work properly. There was a relatively big affair a year or two ago when we had the elections for the European Economic and Social Committee in Croatia, which, as you know, has a specific group of representatives who should come from civil society. And yes, during these elections, there were some manipulations so that some of these civil society designated spots were actually occupied by people who are close to the ruling party. They are members of the party, they are maybe civil servants somewhere, and they have founded these kind of government-controlled NGOs. So there was some fight back from the civil society, but yeah, it's like that in general. The funding is getting cut all the time. The civil society is seen by most institutions as something of a distraction or something to be sidelined. The formal bodies designed for a dialogue between civil society and institutions are being marginalized, and people in them are being, real civil society representatives in these working groups and other bodies are being outnumbered and outvoted by people from the government, basically. We still don't have a strategy for development of civil society. This is a national strategic policy document that has expired, 3-4 years ago. We still don't have the next strategic framework, which is reflected also in other subsets of civil society work, like citizen education and youth work and things like these, the informal education, things like these that are connected somewhat to these progressive causes are being stopped. There is some good work on both the local and national and international levels, but in general, yes, I would say the space is shrinking for the civil society organizations as well as for journalists, because, like I mentioned, a lot of the big media are at least influenced, if not controlled completely, by the government, and those real investigative journalists who are the most important for democracy and for having a balanced public discussion a lot of them are being kind of pushed out of their jobs and forced to work on smaller non-profit media, which are also financially not very